Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined today once again I should have kept track of how many times Theo's been on the show, but it's Theo Gremminger. You know him, you love him. Theo, thank you for being here as always, and tell everybody what you've been up to and what you've been working on.
Yeah, I mean, it's nonstop this time of year, but it's a lot of fun because we actually are getting some worthwhile information coming out after months of like speculation time. So yeah, you can find me over at Fantasy Points. Dynasty Life, you've seen Heath on there a number of times. Fantasy Football Daily is the podcast. It's probably my most active one, dropping multiple episodes a week this time of year. And then School of Scott with Scott Barrett. We're recording 1 or 2 episodes a week. That one has been going really, really well. All of my written work over at Fantasy Points, all of my Dynasty rankings, and my redraft rankings. I have a big article dropping any day this week where I updated my top 100. And I don't just like list out 100 guys. I give about a paragraph, sometimes 2 paragraphs on each player, why I'm ranking them there. And hopefully that'll help you draft well. So yeah, just busy this time of year like yourself, but we're less than a month away. It's time to keep on pushing.
So today is a little bit of a kind of diverse show, but I'll tie it all together with this. We're going to talk in the beginning about some preseason movement. And I always caution people, maybe it takes more to move someone in Dynasty than it does in redraft in terms of preseason news or activity. But as Sigmund Bloom said a couple of weeks ago, this whole Dynasty movement thing is not like a small linear moves. It's huge leaps at specific times. So there have been a few guys who have we've seen their value change. And then we're going to talk about some future potential movers at the running back position. I've got my top 10 running backs that I don't think are going to start week 1 of this year, but could certainly see their value increase during the 2025 season. I want to start, though, if I can keep from sneezing, and I'm not sure that I can. Greg sent an email, and I told you guys, email me, fftdynasty@paramount.com. I'm going to start getting to more of those emails on the show, and I'll try to respond to some of them as well. But Greg won the title last year, but and you've been here, Theo. He can see that the end is on the horizon. He's not throwing in the towel this year, but he already traded Tony Pollard for a 2027 first. Then he drafted Caleb Johnson with the 112, and then he got a trade offer. Somebody has offered him DeAndre Swift, a 2027 first, and 2 future seconds for Caleb Johnson straight up. He likes Caleb Johnson more than DeAndre Swift, but he's wondering, kind of sitting in this teetering range of I've won 1 title, I'm not sure I'm getting a second, and I may have a rebuild on the horizon. Would you trade Caleb Johnson? And he's kind of a guy that's been in the news. A lot of people not pleased with what they saw from him in the preseason. Would you trade him for DeAndre Swift, a first and 2 seconds in the future?
Without a doubt. And I think that there's running backs that I think are a little bit better than Caleb Johnson that I would take that trade package for. I'm bullish on Caleb Johnson. I think Caleb Johnson, the trade there, I think there's actually going to be a trade market for Caleb Johnson coming up kind of right around the corner. There's a lot of, the people on X that are very, very critical of Caleb Johnson, how he looked in the preseason. You're going to see Jalen Warren getting some usage early on in the year. But Caleb Johnson, 21 years old, he's got some room to run with his profile, certainly was awesome at Iowa. But I would take that sort of offer for multiple running backs because I'm going to get a first-round pick. And a first-round pick in 2027 is probably about what Caleb Johnson is worth. You're talking about a guy that went pretty late in a lot of first rounds this year. And Heath, he was a 3rd-round pick. We're not talking about a first-round pick or a 2nd-round pick. And with all due respect to Devon Achane, with all due respect to guys like Kamara, there's been a really pretty poor hit rate on 3rd-round draft picks, running backs. Last year at this time, we were very excited about Blake Corum. We were very excited about Trey Benson. The story has not fully been written on those guys, but they're certainly less valuable a year into the NFL. And that's been sort of the case for a lot of these 3rd-round picks. Not to mention, Kendre Miller had a lot of sort of vibes years ago, 3rd-round pick, failed to deliver at all. You can get him for a 5th-round pick now. So I'm into Caleb Johnson, but the idea that we know exactly what's going to happen with running backs that are not drafted in the 1st and 2nd round, I think we get a little bit ahead of ourselves in our evaluation process. And when you tell me I also get DeAndre Swift on top of that, who's 26 years old in a really good situation this year, where he could have a bounce back with receiving work, with volume, and I get 2 second-round picks, that's a slam dunk smash pick. And I think for that sort of offer comes in your inbox, you need to sort of forget where your team is at. To remove the fact that you're a rebuilding team, remove the fact that you think you're a contender. If you get that sort of overwhelming offer, just take it in Dynasty, because it gives you the flexibility to make future moves. 6 weeks into the season, Heath, you could use one of those second-round picks on a guy like James Conner and get really strong running back production. I mean, it's a no-brainer for me to take that deal.
I think Greg probably knew that he was going to send this email in and get praise on the show for getting this deal done, because I've been telling people all off season to acquire DeAndre Swift. He's been way undervalued, I think, for the majority of the off season, although we've seen his value creep up a little bit recently. I thought I was the highest person in the fantasy football world on DeAndre Swift, and then I see Cuppy in the chat says Swift top 5 running back this year. Congratulations, Cuppy. You are now the DeAndre Swift guy. Let's get to our 3 questions for Theo. Has anyone's dynasty value actually changed in the last 4 or 5 days since the beginning of preseason week 2?
Every single day, Emeka Egbuka's trade value and dynasty value goes up. It's one of the best drumbeat situation players that actually has good draft capital and actually has a strong pedigree that we've seen in like a long time. And certainly when it comes to Egbuka, it's universal praise from his teammates, universal praise from the beat reporters in Tampa Bay. And then we add that to the unbelievable draft capital that he had in the NFL draft, went in a range that we've seen a lot of big-time hits, was a very similar range as a guy like JSN, a very similar range to a player like Justin Jefferson, Brian Thomas Jr. drafted in this range last season. So for me, Emeka Egbuka hasn't played a down of football yet in the regular season, but it just seems like he's almost nearing that we'd be really surprised if he fails to deliver stage. Yes. And I'll say that with Tampa Bay, we saw it last year, where last year the beat reporters, the coaches, and the players on the team were all continually praising Bucky Irving. He's a great fit for this system. Liam Cohen saying nice things about him. Todd Bowles saying nice things about him. And all of the beat reporters saying Bucky Irving looks awesome. It's the same vibes this year with Egbuka, except we don't have anything to worry about with the draft capital. So to me, Emeka Egbuka, good luck getting a deal done for him in your dynasty trade markets. I drafted him pretty often, but I wish I would have drafted him a little bit more. I've tried to make some pretty strong offers for him recently, and people are just snap declining. Right. The writing is on the wall. Emeka Egbuka is going to have a very strong season. And I think people are way less scared of the target competition around him than they were maybe 2 months ago. And it's not just Chris Godwin being banged up. It's also just Egbuka could just be a takeover candidate where he leads this wide receiver room, even with Mike Evans being fully healthy.
I put a Twitter poll out last week asking who has a higher dynasty value, not right now, but 1 year from today, Emeka Egbuka or Rashee Rice. And Egbuka got about 35 to 40% of the vote, and most of the comments were Rice supporters saying, you guys are insane. But yeah, I think the reason I asked the question is because I actually have them back-to-back right now in my dynasty wide receiver rankings, and I kind of expect that Egbuka does pass him in maybe the next, I was thinking the next 12 months. It might happen in the next 12 weeks. Probably won't happen in the next 12 days. Let's get to the question number 2. And this is one I'm catching you off guard, but I'm just curious because we get waiver wire questions this time of year from dynasty leagues that have closed waivers until training camp opens. And then I've got other leagues that waivers have been wide open since the end of the rookie draft. And so I'm just wondering, like, amongst those lower end guys, have you made any waiver ads since the start of training camp?
Most of my leagues that I compete with for Dynasty are FFPC. So the waiver wire run will not, there'll be 2 runs, right? One at the end of the month and then one right before the season. But I think if you're in leagues where waivers are available to you, monitor, especially in deeper formats, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is still going to be available in some leagues. He is a no-brainer add with a pathway to fantasy viability this season. It's another drum beats guy where everybody likes him. Everything's sort of going well for him. The beat reporters, his teammates, Dan Quinn, all saying positive things about him in Washington. Washington was a top 5 rushing offense last year. And Brian Robinson Jr., solid player, but not some like amazing bell cow that he needs to overcome to get weekly touches. Keep an eye on Rocket Sanders, who was an undrafted free agent this year. Very productive player in the SEC. Goes undrafted. He could take over Kamani Vidal. It looks like he could end up taking over for Kamani Vidal. Some positives with him right now. With the Najee Harris situation being up in the air, he could end up being a direct handcuff to Amarian Hampton. Sean Tucker is another one. I know he's available in pretty much every FFPC Dynasty League. Sean Tucker could end up being a very valuable player to have. Tampa Bay used 2 running backs a lot last year. Rashad White, we don't know the extent of his injury. Sounds like a groin injury. So who knows where that's going. But Sean Tucker, we saw him have a really, really strong, like 35-point performance last year in week 6. So we know he's capable of it. He was a player that a lot of people liked coming out of Syracuse. Didn't get drafted because he was injured, but he's one of those guys that had like a 6-figure signing bonus as an undrafted free agent. So I think those 3 names sort of stand out to me that might be available in leagues as like very interesting players. I think in more shallow formats, Torrey Horton certainly has the steam going in Seattle. And if you're in a tight end premium format, keep an eye on AJ Barner. I'm a huge Elijah Arroyo guy, but I think Barner could be on the field a lot and could potentially play ahead of him, at least early on in the season. If you're in one of these crazy deep tight end premium formats, Barner's a name to monitor.
And I'll go ahead and apologize for one thing. I'm going to sneeze at some point in the next 2 minutes. It's going to happen. But you stole Sean Tucker's name right off of my lips. I was able to hold on to him in 2 dynasty leagues throughout this offseason. I'm very happy about that. There have been others that I've dropped him because he was a guy who was a pretty high roster percentage guy for me. But I do still have a couple of Sean Tucker shares left. I will be looking to add a few more when waivers open. Now we're going to change gears completely. And I'm just, trying to get a diversity of questions for our guests. That's my only motivation here at all, Theo. Do you have a specific mindset when you go into a startup draft? Any guardrails? Or is it just like, let's see what the draft gives me?
That's a really interesting question. I think that a lot of people these days want to go in and have a productive struggle mentality and accumulate future first-round picks. This used to be an edge maybe 5-6 years ago where there were fewer managers going for it. Now sometimes you get into these dynasty startup drafts and the majority of the league is trying to accumulate first-rounders. So I think be open-minded to different approaches. I think that you kind of have an idea of where your league is going to be leaning when you get into the buildup of the draft. Usually in some of these leagues, you'll get the draft order either generated or done through some process. And then after that, you can kind of see it from either trade offers in your inbox or from the league message boards. But if I'm in a league and I'm seeing all these people saying, we'll trade down, want future picks, we'll trade down, want future picks, at some point it becomes the edge to consider giving up a future pick because it might be a cheaper cost than it actually should be based on these managers sort of digging their heels in and saying, this is what I'm going to do. So for me, I think going in with an open mind in your dynasty startups is the best way to do it. Sometimes you can end up with an absolute monster team that has a chance to not only win this year, but win next year. And there's been other leagues where I have been on the same page where I'm trying to accumulate the first, depending on what my league mates want. I want to walk out of each and every dynasty startup with a team that's either capable of really, really doing damage and being ready to go in year one, or a team that I think is going to give me an opportunity to really, really have a long-term powerhouse that might struggle a little bit earlier and really attack the youth, attack the picks. So I think being open-minded, seeing which way your league is going and which way you can extract value is the best way to approach these things.
You answered that as if you knew the segue and the motivations for the question. But I want to remind you guys that Theo is a part of the inaugural FFT Dynasty League, and we will be drafting against each other in just a week or two. And so I was trying to get a little bit of an edge there, seeing what his philosophy was. It didn't work out. He handled it like a pro, but you can be a part of this league. We still have 2 days left for the St. Jude Draftathon auction. Things are heating up. I saw a lot of bids come through last night. I would love for you guys to be a part of that. The link is available on my Twitter X page. It's also, we put it in the chat all the time for how you can bid on these spots. There's lots of other things you can bid on as well, but I'd love it if you guys could help us raise money for St. Jude. Come draft against Theo and I, show us how it's done. And, you know, it's going to be a good time too. It's great. I think this will be my first Dynasty League with Theo. So I'm really excited about that. Appreciate you, Harry, for putting those links up there. Go check out. And as a reminder, there are a couple of spots also available if you don't happen to win the auctions, just for listeners or people who are active here in the YouTube chat. You can still email me. I've got a couple of favorites right now, but I'm not making the decision until after the auction closes. We'll likely announce those spots on Friday's episode of FFT Dynasty. So you can still email me at fftdynasty@paramount.com for a chance to get in the league a different way. But if you want to make sure you're in, go win one of those 2 auctions. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we'll get to some backup running backs who could see their values just explode.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
I guess I should be careful with saying they could see their value just explode, because that could be a bad thing. But that's not what I was thinking about. I've got 10 running backs who are all inside of my top 50 at the running back position who I don't expect to start week 1. I'll add one more asterisk. You're not going to see Trevion Henderson or the Steelers or the Browns. Well, one of the Browns, but not Quinshon Judkins. You're not going to see Travis Etienne or Tank Bigsby. You're not going to see David Montgomery, who, yeah, he may not start. You know what? He might play the first snap of the game. We don't ever know with the Lions. These are, I'm looking for more true backups. I'll give you the 10 names, and then we'll talk about them kind of in tiers a little bit. So I've got Braylon Allen at RB26, Trey Benson at RB27, Zach Charbonnet at RB31, then Jordan Mason, RB33, Cam Scattaboo, RB36, Dylan Sampson, RB37, Tyjae Spears, RB40, the name that I have no idea what to do with, Jonathan Brooks at 42, Jalen Wright at 45, and Ollie Gordon. That's another guy whose value may have just gone up with the Alexander Madison injury, because his size, he could work into that goal line role. He is number 10 amongst these backup running backs. I'll get to in a second, Theo. I'm sure you've got a couple of names rattling around your head right now. Why wasn't this guy listed? Because we all have different rankings. But I want to start with kind of, I think, the first 3. Braylon Allen, Trey Benson, Zach Charbonnet. These seem like, to me, the 3 guys who are young enough, skilled enough, and have a potential opportunity this year to just leap into the top 20 running backs, and it won't be that surprising. Do you have a strong favorite amongst these 3, or is it a pretty solid tier?
No, I mean, I think I've had a kind of a soft spot for Braylon Allen for a long time, and I accumulated a lot of shares of Allen last year when he was a little bit cheaper in the second half of the season. And I certainly, on any team that I had Breece Hall, I did what I could to acquire Allen when it wasn't cost prohibitive. I think he's super interesting because I've always had this in the back of my mind with Allen, and I've talked about it with some really, really smart people that weren't necessarily as into him. It's a very highly pedigreed player at Wisconsin, got on the field at a very young age, started in the Big Ten at 17 years old, and was very, very good. And if anything, his production sort of was its worst his last season at Wisconsin. But with Allen, he's this like next worldly sized human where he's 240 pounds and it's the good kind of 240. There's always the story that sort of resonates in my head where Robert Saleh talked about how they draft Braylon Allen. Robert Saleh says, this guy's 240, 245. It would be better for him to play at 230. Goes and tells his strength and conditioning coach, he says, let's get this Allen kid down to 230. It's going to make him a little bit faster. And the guy says to him, Coach, that sounds great and everything, but Braylon Allen has one of the lowest body fats on the team right now. He's 8% body fat at 240. He literally cannot lose weight. And that just resonates in my head because coaches want to gravitate towards these sort of players. It seems like Aaron Glenn really wants to run the ball. Glenn seems to really like Braylon Allen. And I think the ascension for him could kind of be rapid this year. And unlike Benson and Charbonnet, he doesn't need an injury in that backfield to sort of make a really big mark. And certainly I think Benson's going to get his touches. Charbonnet will get some touches. But Allen could have a weekly role in that offense where he's this maybe 12 carry a game guy, catches a couple of passes here and there, nothing really designed for him. But I think he'll get the goal line work. And I think he can coexist with Breece Hall this year because I think the Jets are going to have to lean on the running back spot because they just don't have the skill position talent. I think they want to play multiple backs. You've got Tanner Engstrand coming over from Detroit, where it was Jahmyr Gibbs with David Montgomery. Allen in the Montgomery role could be a really, really valuable one. And then Heath, with Allen, we have this extremely young player too. He's only 21 years old. So he'll eventually be a free agent at 23 years old. Either the Jets sign him or he could be on this David Montgomery pathway where teams will look at him as a young free agent back that we can just plug and play in. So I think Allen has a lot of room to run dynasty-wise, gain a lot of value early in the year. Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker is already on like sort of a maintenance path here where the Seahawks say they have a plan for him. I love Kenneth Walker. I think if Kenneth Walker is healthy this year, I think he's going to score a ton. But Zach Charbonnet, he was great last year in the games where Walker didn't play. He had 3 top 8 weekly finishes. He averaged 19 points per game in the 5 games where he played over 70% of the snaps. So Charbonnet's shown us that he's extremely valuable. And with Benson, it's a reason we liked him coming out. He was really, really athletic, extremely high speed score guy, productive at Florida State. And James Conner, if he misses time, I think Benson would really take off. So for me, all 3 of them are really, really appealing. And I think all 3 of them, if you have an opportunity to have these kind of guys on your dynasty roster, they'll all be instant top 15 weekly plays if the starter goes down in front of them, if not higher.
So I thought that was kind of the next thing I was thinking, because I agree with you that it seems like Braylon Allen has a better path at the beginning of this year, if nobody gets hurt, to at least having maybe a flex-worthy role, maybe a little bit better. I think the David Montgomery role, you have to put the little asterisk by it that the Jets are probably not going to be the highest scoring offense in the league like the Lions have been. So that role won't be quite as valuable, but it still could definitely be a flex worthy role. Let's look into this hypothetical world where Breece Hall gets traded and James Conner goes off the age cliff at 30 years old. And he hasn't shown any signs of that. He was awesome last year. Let's just say he does. And Ken Walker's nagging injury keeps him out for a while. These 3 guys are all starting running backs. Which one do you think does a better job in that role?
Charbonnet, because I think in the Clint Kubiak offense, they're going to highly utilize the fullback position in Seattle this year, which sort of is a player that's on the field who's not going to touch the ball. So it's going to really consolidate the touches among whoever the starting running back is and guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cooper Kupp when healthy. And I think it's going to be really beneficial. Seattle, again, the numbers we cited for Charbonnet, Seattle was a bottom 5 rushing offense last year, right, which was a lot of the reason they made the offensive coordinator change. Kubiak seems really, really sharp. He had a lot of early season success with New Orleans last year. And when it comes to Charbonnet, he has the highest draft capital pedigree of any of these players. Benson, the 3rd round pick, Braylon Allen, a 4th round pick, and Charbonnet was a 2nd round pick who they took early on in the 2nd round, with obviously Ken Walker having a strong rookie season. So Charbonnet just checks off a lot of boxes here, and I believe in his ability to sustain a lot of volume. That being said, I mean, Allen would get a ton of touches without Breece Hall. Benson would certainly get a lot of touches without James Conner, but we already have a sample size of Charbonnet doing it. and he's the highest pedigreed player of the mix. So Charbonnet for me.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I would be between Charbonnet and Benson because that Arizona run offense has been so good. I wish the pass game would pick up just a little bit. I've got 3 more guys ranked in the 30s. Jordan Mason, who could be kind of, I mean, he's an older player, but he could be in that same Braylon Allen type role this year. Every week it seems we hear, no, they really want to hand the ball off to Jordan Mason more. They don't want to use Aaron Jones as much. Then Cam Skattebo, currently injured. We thought the camp battle with Tyrone Tracy. Sounds like at least week 1, it's probably going to be Tracy. And then Dylan Sampson, the guy who has kind of emerged with Quinshon Judkins' legal problems, and a guy that I think a lot of us really liked before the draft in terms of what type of rusher he could be in the NFL, what he can do in the passing game, but then he landed behind Judkins and everybody just forgot about him. So between Mason, Skattebo, and Sampson, is it just a case of Mason is probably the better bet to get work this year? The other 2 guys are better bench stashes for the future?
I think that's a good way of looking at it. Mason might be a 1-year bet. And I say that respectfully to him, but when you're talking about a 25-year-old running back, it's going to take a lot for him to establish himself as like Minnesota's running back of the future. I've been drafting a ton of Jordan Mason. And that's been in redraft. I have some Jordan Mason in Dynasty. Wish I had a little bit more. He's a really, really fun bet for this season because Aaron Jones a little bit older. Sounds like Minnesota could be very run happy this year. Sort of protect JJ McCarthy and also take advantage of a very strong offensive line situation. Aaron Jones, again, handled all the volume he could, but he's 30 years old. 2 seasons ago, Aaron Jones missed some time. So for me, I like Mason a lot, but again, from a dynasty perspective, the couple of players you listed earlier, Allen, Benson, Charbonnet, all younger than Mason. So Mason, I really like, but just consider him to be sort of a 1-year mercenary guy for you on your dynasty roster. And if you get something better than that, then that's fantastic. So I think Jordan Mason, like you talk about seasons like we saw with Jamal Williams, seasons like we saw with LeGarrette Blount, where Raheem Mostert for that matter, where you have these guys who get a goal line role in a plus offense and they run for a ton of touchdowns. That could be Jordan Mason this year with a bull case. So I think he's really interesting. Skattebo missing time in the preseason, I don't really like it. No. I think that there were positive vibes there. It's Tracy's job to lose now, it seems like. But with Tracy, he fumbled the ball a lot last year. He also had a lot of drops. So if Tracy plays well, I think he'll hold on to the job. If Tracy struggles, then I think Skattebo is going to be able to get a foot in the door there. We don't like seeing those 4th round rookies miss any time in the preseason. I'd rather see him out on the field.
I agree with that completely. No, it's that time of year where we have a lot of things going on, Theo, and I just was notified and reminded, I knew it. I was just reminded that my Superflex Flex League draft just started. So I'll be keeping you guys updated as that goes on. I took Bijan Robinson with 107. Feeling pretty good about that start. Like it a lot. Let's move on to the next group. One thing I wanted to touch on with my values of these guys, because I think they might have shocked a couple of people. I just pulled up DLF ADP, which is still for the month of July. We'll get August at the end of the month. Of these, I'm just with a little guessing game. So Braylon Allen, Trey Benson, Zach Charbonnet, Jordan Masons, Cam Skattebo, Dylan Sampson. Which of those guys do you think had the highest ADP last month?
Skattebo.
By a mile.
Yeah.
Cam Skattebo was RB25 in ADP last month. Amongst the guys I've talked about, Charbonnet is next at 35, then Benson at 37. There's a Jordan Mason at 41, Braylon Allen all the way down at RB49 in recent Dynasty ADP. So if you're looking for which of these guys that Theo and I have talked about and expressed similar feelings on some of them, who's the best buy? The best buy right now seems to be Braylon Allen by a mile. The last 4 guys I have, Dylan Sampson, or Tyjae Spears, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Wright, Ollie Gordon. Let's start with Spears because he also just suffered the injury. And we've heard, you talked about drum beats. We've kind of heard the drum beat for most of this offseason that the Titans would like to chop up the touches just a little bit more. when it comes to how they split up between Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. Now Spears has got the injury. They may, after what happened last year with the injuries, kind of feel like, maybe Tyjae Spears doesn't need more work, but everybody seems to be more excited about Spears than Pollard. Where are you at on Spears?
The Spears one is really, really disappointing because it seemed like he was headed in the right direction this year to have like an increased workload. He had the 3 RB1 weeks to finish the year. And just from and you'll get this one as a content creator. We do these brain trust articles at Fantasy Points where it's Joe Dolan, Scott Barrett, Ryan Heath, myself, and a number of others will participate in it. And we all get asked the same question. And we answer something with like 3 paragraphs, 2 paragraphs. They've been a lot of fun this offseason. We had our favorite 0 RB target, and I listed Tyjae Spears, and I wrote these beautiful like 3-4 paragraphs about him, and then I had to go rewrite it last minute. So that was fun. But I think with Spears, him missing time, it's annoying. It's a high ankle sprain, and last year he dealt with injuries. He dealt with concussions, and now he's starting off the year sort of on the wrong foot. So the Spears one sort of annoys me. I do think he's a very talented football player. He had the 52 receptions as a rookie, played really well behind Derrick Henry, but definitely gets off on the slow track. And I'm curious to see just if there's any chance that he re-aggravates it, all those sort of things. So it really stinks. Samson, you have him listed, really fun player. Was looked at sort of like a luxury pick, like Cleveland selects him in the 4th round after taking Judkins at 35 overall. Samson was extremely productive in the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, led the SEC in rushing touchdowns, led the SEC in rushing yardage. He's a really fun one because I think he could get on the field and play the whole year. The Judkins situation is really ugly right now. We don't know what's going on with it. We don't know with the off the field stuff and also the contract situation. So Samson has an opportunity as like a 21-year-old back to be on the field a ton. Brooks, I don't know. I mean, the Brooks one is just,
I don't either.
Yeah. For me, it's almost, it seems like the Trevor Etienne pick was sort of writing on the wall that Carolina's like, hey, we still got Jonathan Brooks on the roster, but we don't have a whole lot of hope for this thing. We'll take this young back who can do some of the Brooks things like catching passes, and maybe we'll get what could have been with Jonathan Brooks in like the aggregate. And then I think it's interesting you have Wright and Gordon because those two guys are sort of battling with one another. Gordon, extremely productive. We talked about him on podcast in the build up to the NFL draft. We talked about him after the Senior Bowl, had a really strong Senior Bowl, really looks the part. Jalen Wright, extremely athletic player. One of those two players is going to cannibalize the other. Right. And whoever wins that out, I think is going to gain dynasty value. And the other one is going to be looked at as sort of a roster clogger. So that's a really important battle because the Raheem Mostert role is there. They've said that they want to have a secondary running back taking on the goal line touches, maybe the short yardage. Keep our guy Devon Achane healthy all season long so he can catch a ton of passes and break off long runs. So I think those two are really, really interesting ones.
And so I think like we had a question from the chat. Why is Wright so far down? What am I missing? Or am I missing something? And what I might be missing is clarity on that battle. And I think that Alexander Madison was going to complicate things maybe even more. What I kind of am wondering at this point right now is when they talk about wanting to have a second back that they use with Achane, I feel like they want someone who's a little bit different in terms of skill set, somebody who might function better as a goal line back. And that seems to me to be more like Gordon than Wright. I think if something happens to Achane, then Wright's more likely to fill the things that Achane's doing. But if they're looking for a complementary back to Achane, then Gordon might be better in that role. Do you think that's a fair characterization?
Yeah, I said something very similar in an article, how Wright seems like sort of the direct handcuff. He's extremely fast. You could do a lot of the, not like everything that Achane does, but be somewhat similar. Gordon's sort of his own guy. We saw him in like this extremely high volume role. He was awesome in 2023 for Oklahoma State. Then last year, Oklahoma State took this big setback. They won 3 games. The production went down for Gordon. So I'm with you on that. I think that they are definitely a little bit different there. Whereas maybe maybe the move would be to still sort of roster right if you have Devon Achane, even if he gets quote unquote beaten out by Ollie Gordon, because Miami could just see Gordon as sort of a better fit in the Mostert role.
I think that makes perfect sense. Now comes the time where you get to tell me who I forgot, and didn't necessarily forget. I'll go ahead and say one name for you, and then if you have some others, go ahead. But Bashal Tutin is the guy I already been mentioned in the chat. People are more excited about than I am. I know on Monday he got some run with the first team offense in practice. It is the preseason. A lot of guys do get run with the first team offense throughout that. The majority of the news in camp so far has been positive news about Tank Bigsby and then a positive role for Travis Etienne. But Tutin certainly fits into this group of guys who could become starters and really see their value skyrocket. And there will be a lot of people telling me I was wrong if that's what happened. Is there anyone besides Bashal Tutin that you think of in terms of younger backup running backs who belong on this list?
Yeah, so not necessarily guys that I think I would cram on this list, but I do think that there's a number of backs who could be direct handcuffs in really, really plus offenses, where if there's an injury to the running back ahead of them, I think that the Dynasty marketplace would react because I think these guys would put up numbers. Jarquez Hunter, I like a lot. He's certainly competing with Blake Corum, who had higher draft capital than him in the 2023 draft. Or excuse me, the 2024 draft. But Hunter, to me, he's explosive, and you're getting a big discount on him now because dynasty managers see that Kyron Williams was extended. Williams earned this big contract extension, but as a direct handcuff, I think Hunter makes a little bit more sense than Corum. I think he's very, very explosive, very versatile, can catch the ball out of the backfield, very productive at Auburn. Taj Brooks in that direct handcuff role behind Chase Brown. We love Chase Brown for this season. He's very highly ranked at Fantasy Points, but again, he was a day 3 pick. The long-term clarity might not necessarily be there with Brown, and I think Brooks would have a very similar role if he were to go down. Those two names sort of stand out to me a little bit, and obviously Ray Davis would be one where I think it's going to end up being somewhat similar to the Kyron Williams situation. Sounds like James Cook, a Heath Cummings favorite, by the way, James Cook, might get his contract extension any day now. He's back on the field at practice. Sean McDermott said some nice things about him this morning. It's been kind of like a hold-in situation. So I think the Cook could gain some dynasty value, but it doesn't necessarily change anything with Davis, where if James Cook were to miss time, we saw what Davis was capable of on like a 1-week sample size last year. Very productive college player. And that Buffalo offense, much like Cincinnati, is going to score a ton of points. So just those kind of direct handcuff players I'm interested in having on my dynasty roster, especially in leagues where people might not value them as much as I do.
Awesome stuff from Theo. Those are some running backs that you might just do a price check on, especially since we're a lot higher on a couple of them like Braylon Allen than the consensus seems to be. Let's take our second break. When we come back, I've got a few strategy questions for Theo to wrap things up.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
So we are rapidly approaching real football. I mean, I know we got preseason football, but I'm talking about real football, point scoring season where we win fantasy matches and we lose them. A lot of this theoretical dynasty stuff starts to look a little bit more like the redraft world for the next 3 or 4 months. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit about roster construction when you're contending, when you're rebuilding, and what types of moves people might look to make in the next couple of weeks before the season gets started. So if you're a contender, let's start there. What types of players are you looking to add, and are you doing that before the season, or are you kind of wanting to get a couple weeks into the season and see where your team stands and then start making moves?
I think, like, whenever possible, waiting a little bit of time into the season is better for you to try to, especially when you're talking about trading younger assets, when you're talking about trading draft picks to kind of push the chips in. If one of your main players goes down with an injury, and in some seasons we've seen it where maybe 2 or 3 of your main players go down with injuries, then your outlook for the season becomes murkier and your chances at winning a championship go down significantly. you don't want to be a team that finishes like 8th in your league with no draft picks that you've traded away. Now you've traded away potentially top 5 draft picks for the upcoming season. I also think that there's another level to this where if, let's say you start the season out well, let's say you're 5-2, let's say you're 6-1, and you're saying, I can see the finish line in sight. I want to start looking for trades. You're going to find better value on older players 6 games into the season, especially from rebuilding managers, where the cost might be for an older veteran, it might cost you a first-round pick now. When it gets to be the middle of the season and these potential rebuilding managers start feeling the pressure on them to get deals done, it might cost you 2 second-round picks instead. It might cost you a single second-round pick. So I've found that a lot of times I get better values when I'm a contender trading during the season. Now, if you're a rebuilding manager, it's nuanced. It's way more nuanced. Having the particular timing correct on when to trade an asset, it really is reflective to your league. Certain leagues are going to be more active where there's more trades getting completed. Certain leagues are going to be way more passive. And you have to consider, if I only had one trade offer for this player and no other manager in my league is trying to acquire them, then maybe I should think about making a move just in case that player loses value during the season. So hopefully if you're a rebuilding manager, you're not carrying too many older assets with you right now. And when I'm a rebuilding manager, I also want to, if I'm in a super flex league, consider rostering a few backup quarterbacks because they have extreme value if they get opportunities to start. Also rostering as many handcuff running backs as possible because, again, you see that short-term value boost where they become starters. People will pay a premium tax for that. So I want to construct my roster not only looking at the future, but looking at potential trades I can make in season. And I have more flexibility with the back end of my roster to carry sort of these dead asset 0-point players than maybe a contender does who's trying to win every single week in their dynasty league. So a lot of nuance to that. I also think that there's a certain level of, if I'm a potential rebuilder and I'm carrying a high profile veteran, then it might make more sense for me to start the season, let them go a month, even if there's a little bit of gambling and risk. The best example is Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry, where if you're a rebuilding manager, you're probably not carrying them, but there's a chance that in your league, it just happened where you have a really young roster and then you have one of those 2 anchor backs. If one of those guys is averaging 22 points a game 4 weeks into the season, people are going to pay more than your trade offers now where they'll say, I'm not going to pay a lot for this 31-year-old or this 29-year-old. That conversation changes if that player is like the RB1 or RB2 overall.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at it, because that was kind of one of the next things I was going to ask about is, are there certain players, and I understand like what it could be for McCaffrey or Henry after 4 weeks. At the same time, McCaffrey or Henry could have, like Henry, 0 dynasty value by week 4. If something goes wrong with him, no one's projecting anything for a future year. And so one thing I kind of thought about, and I don't know if you look at it this way, but on these veterans and you're trying to decide whether to deal them before the season or carry some of that risk and then try to maximize their value. Do you look at your rankings and try to kind of figure out if you are high, if you think they're worth more right now than consensus does, then maybe let's hold and see if consensus catches up to that? Or if you think, if you're already lower on this guy and he's a veteran and you're a rebuilder, would you like to just see if you can get rid of him for that cost because you think his value is going to go down?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can trust your gut on a lot of these things. And if you feel uncomfortable holding a player, then by all means make the move. If you're not high on, I think most people are sort of high on Derrick Henry right now. Right. If he's healthy, he's going to score. That's not necessarily the best example, but I think you could find a guy like a James Conner. If your comfort level with Conner is lower than your league mates or lower than consensus, then yeah, there's always going to be a move for you to move him. I think the big litmus test player is Tyreek Hill, because Tyreek Hill, we've seen this steam where he's become basically a 2-3 turn pick in a lot of redraft formats. Now he's dealing with like a little bit of an oblique injury, which isn't really a big thing now, but could end up being something. There's apparently some sort of arguments, not necessarily getting along with Mike McDaniel. So you always have sort of the things going on with Tyreek Hill. He's one where there's going to be someone in your dynasty league who's willing to pay you right now to get Tyreek Hill for the season. And I think if anything, he's gained value versus like the NFL draft time where there was some question marks about what was going on with him. So I think this is a trade window to move him before he's even played a down of football. And if you trade him now and then he ends up scoring like 35 points in week 1, then you can be kind of angry at me for that advice. But I do think he's a range of outcomes guy, whereas Henry and McCaffrey, it's more of a, can these guys just stay healthy this year?
It's very well put. And you mentioned the backup quarterbacks, and I think that goes to backup running backs as well when you're rebuilding, like guys that are not scoring any points but could see a rapid increase in value. Those are excellent suggestions for those rebuilders. I kind of wanted to take the quarterback discussion a different way, though. And these guys have different levels of floors, I think. But there's 3 much older quarterbacks, and you could even include Matthew Stafford if you wanted to, 4 much older quarterbacks who, if as long as they're healthy, we expect to start week 1, and a couple of them we think that they'll start most of the season. And so you can kind of take them on a case-by-case basis if you want, but when it comes to Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and yet now even it seems like Joe Flacco, do you think in like the super flex dynasty world, those guys are more undervalued or overvalued right now?
I think a lot of times starting quarterbacks like this get overvalued. But for me, the only guy on this that you listed that I would be interested in taking on this year is actually Aaron Rodgers. Okay. Because Aaron Rodgers, like when it comes to Russell Wilson, I think Jackson Dart's going to take over. Who knows what's going on in Cleveland this year? I think a lot of Joe Flacco just hanging on to the job is not only his play on the field, but how the team is doing. If Cleveland starts the year off 1-5, what is the point of keeping Joe Flacco on the field? Take a look at Shedeur Sanders, take a look at Dylan Gabriel, see what you've got there. And then when it comes to Matthew Stafford, man, if we were talking 2.5 months ago, Stafford would have been a player that I just loved acquiring in trades and loved getting in these late dynasty startups where I could double tap like Geno Smith and Matt Stafford as my QB2 with maybe a high-end quarterback like a Lamar Jackson and like a super flex startup. But the vibes with Stafford are really weird right now. I mean, they have like an Airstream van outside of the facility with like a futuristic kind of tanning bed looking thing.
He's not like this sounds, if you've not been paying attention, like Theo's going off on some sort of rant trying to tell like a poetic version of what's happening. No, this is the literal thing that is going on with Matthew Stafford right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen this, and I think I'm regularly in the gym, and I've seen sort of what like red light saunas and those sort of things are. This is something next level. And if it works for Stafford, I think you'll see it in every single NBA locker room and every single NFL locker room in the future. But there's this van outside of the LA facility, and Stafford's spending time in it and trying to like get his body right for the season. It just doesn't seem like this is a great vibes when it comes to Stafford. They're saying all the right things. They're saying he'll play week 1. I don't like it. And I don't like it long term. It just seems like Stafford, we've had a couple of off seasons where what's going on with Stafford, these things start to build up. He's 34 years old. So I think he's got a lot of more time to play, but maybe that gets short-lived. So for me, I'm looking at all these guys as 1-year bets. Aaron Rodgers is the one where I think he's going to start the full season. Pittsburgh views themselves as a contender this year. They've made a great effort to add impact players on both sides of the ball. They view DK Metcalf as a massive addition for them. They are very excited to get Jonnu Smith. You referenced Caleb Johnson. The offensive line should be better this year. They played a lot of young players last year. So for me, Aaron Rodgers doesn't really have a ceiling that I'm excited about, but he is a player that I think is going to be a starter for the entire year unless things go extremely south for Pittsburgh. And why do we think things would go south with Pittsburgh when Mike Tomlin wins every single year, and he's won with a lot worse rosters than what he has this year in Pittsburgh? So I'm actually cautiously optimistic that Rodgers could put up call it a quarterback 20 season, Heath. It's not like a very high bar, but I think Rodgers being like the QB 20, him being my QB 3, as a guy that I can use in case of a short-term injury, use in case of a bye week fill-in, I'm okay with that. Whereas some of these other guys, I think Russell Wilson's a dead asset. Joe Flacco's a dead asset. Rodgers has maybe gives me the season.
I'm a little bit more optimistic about Wilson, I think, just in the possibility that he's, from fantasy production basis, he's been better than the way he's been viewed over the last 3 years. He, like Rodgers, even when he's not producing yardage totals, he always produces a pretty decent touchdown rate, and he's got Malik Neighbors. And I think that organization, while they're kind of like Cleveland, they're probably not anywhere close to competitive. They might have a coach that needs to try for as long as possible to be competitive. So I could see Wilson still providing some value, and his cost and valuation is extremely low. So we did have one question on the backup running backs. A lot of times I leave extra time for questions at the end of the show. Don't have a lot of that today because you got so much great information. But one name we didn't mention is Jadon Blue. So somebody in the chat asked, did I miss Jadon Blue? I don't know how you're feeling about this Cowboys running back room. I wouldn't say that it like terrifies me. It just kind of feels a little bit gross. And I'm not sure anybody's going to be very productive. Blue was the one who showed a little bit of pop and is young enough that he could have been exciting, but I think he's also hurt right now as well. Does Blue belong in that category of running backs we were talking about earlier?
I think Blue's really, really interesting, and I want to have some dynasty exposure to him. I do have a few shares of Blue. The guy could really catch the ball at Texas, and he was doing that around other future NFL picks. NFL players surrounding him at Texas. So when it comes to Blue, a lot of people will point out, the overall production at Texas. He played behind some guys at times, but he's also playing behind guys like Jonathan Brooks, who were really big-time NFL prospects. The best argument for Blue is very fast and can catch the ball, and he's surrounded by guys that look like they were kind of cooked the last couple of years with Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. It sounds like it's Javonte to start the season in Dallas this year. Now, does that mean a bunch of RB27, RB28 type weeks? It could be.
Right.
I think if Blue is interesting because he's almost a redraft bet more so than a best ball bet, because in best ball, like, there's chances he could be a zero, but in redraft, if there's some attrition in that backfield, Blue sees his way on the field. He has the highest weekly ceiling of any of these backs because, again, runs very fast, can catch passes. It's a simple game. And we think it's going to be a wide open offense that could score some points. So I'll take some shots on Blue. You tell me I get a 4-3 back around guys who are probably running like, what's Javonte running these days? 4.7, 4.75?
I'm maybe the second year off the ACL. He's up to a 4.5. That would be fantastic. Theo, fantastic job today. Always love having you on. Really appreciate you agreeing to be part of the FFT Dynasty League. Looking forward to drafting with you next week. And hopefully I'll get to draft with a couple of you as well. Tell people one more time where they can find your work and what you got coming up.
Yeah, so check out all my written work, all my dynasty ranks, all my redraft ranks over at Fantasy Points. Code Theo 2025 gets you something off. School of Scott podcast with Scott Barrett. We're recording 1 or 2 episodes a week, every single week. Dynasty Life, that's my dynasty podcast. Heath's been on, and he'll be on again as many times as he wants to come on. And then Fantasy Football Daily. That's the show where I'm dropping multiple shows a week. And during the season, we've got you covered for the waiver wire. I'm joined by Joe Dolan and Tom Brawley once a week on the waivers. Graham Barfield and I are going to be doing start sits. I have my own fantasy football takeaways that'll drop every single Monday for you. The most important things that we learned on Sunday. And then I have a guest show every week. So I'm going to try to drop 4 episodes a week. Check out all these podcasts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and check out Fantasy Points YouTube as well. Give us a subscription. We've been really, really growing this summer there. Really proud of the work we're putting out over on YouTube.
Go check out everything Theo's doing. You will get smarter about fantasy football. Thank you guys for listening. Thanks to Harry to making everything work. We will talk to you on Friday.